I take over here, Alexandra, or?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, so yeah, I thank you to all the panelists for a great second panel of the day. I learned a lot about water and the challenges related to water, how to and especially also water desalinization. And now what I'm going to try to do is I'm just kind of try to sort of jump back to our broader questions that we tried to address throughout the last 2 days, which was all around questions of justice in the context of green hydrogen, in the context of this newly developing sector, and what it means for different countries, for different stakeholders, for different actors along the value chain internationally. And we started out with Franziska Müller presenting a concept of hydrogen justice, which is kind of a multifaceted concept. But maybe we can sort of concentrate on the two main dimensions that also Alexandra just mentioned a little bit briefly in the previous panel, is basically the procedural justice and the distributional justice. And procedural justice is, of course, the question of who participates in decision making, who is allowed to influence how projects are developed, whether projects are developed, and how they're governed, and kind of what kind of shape and form they take. So that's one very critical aspect, and I think it's, in a way, it's the key to all the other aspects too, because if we have a fair and just approach procedurally, then likely we will also have better outcomes with that second dimension or core dimension of hydrogen justice, which is the distributional part. And of course, there's the other parts, for example, the epistemic justice that Franziska also mentioned, which is important because if we don't have epistemic justice, then it's hard to have procedural justice that actually is fair, in the sense that everybody does participate or has the chance to properly participate and get their voice heard. But going back to the distributional side, so essentially here we're talking about how costs and benefits are, or who assumes the costs and who shares in the benefits, right? And I think we focused a little bit more on the costs, on the negative impacts, for example, on water, especially in this last panel. And that's, of course, an important aspect. But we did also talk a little bit about benefits, especially in the previous panel that I moderated. And it was interesting because, for example, in the US context, the main issue that Joe Kendrick sort of highlighted was that, there were additional incentives to actually bring hydrogen projects to so-called disadvantaged communities. So it was actually, it was all about who gets those projects, who gets to get those benefits from those industrial investments. Okay, so it's quite a different perspective from what we had here. But I think in general, we've done a lot in the last couple of days talking about costs, how to ensure that those costs are not inflicted disproportionately on certain communities. But I think there's actually a lot still to be done and discussed on how we share the benefits appropriately. And maybe that could even be the more tricky part, because it gets very complicated when we want to sort of figure out a way to appropriately share revenues, for example. That's, I think, a big issue that Namibia, I know, is kind of grappling with, is trying to develop approaches with, but it's going to be very difficult, I think, to do it in a way that does justice to the challenge. Because, and that kind of brings me to the point that I think that, when we talk about distributional justice, it's important to look at both of those things together, because the costs are sort of, it's important to look at the costs in relationship to the benefits. And that brings us to this concept of sacrifice zones, because I think the idea of sacrifice zones is that, well, these are communities that bear a lot of costs that do not share in the benefits. And I think Rainer was saying, well, but we need to also talk about you know, the opportunity of industrial development, maybe, you know, green hydrogen is actually better than what we have in place today, in this particular case that we spoke about in northern Chile. But again, if it's better, it might be better for certain people. And the question is who benefits? And I think, again, that's a very, very tricky issue. So main takeaway from that I'm trying to sort of propose is, you know, we need to think about these costs and these benefits, and we need to think about them together, because that's really what matters is how costs and benefits are distributed, not just one or the other side of the equation. And then another thing I think that would be interesting to explore further and address much more explicitly is the question of risks. I mean, I tried to address that in the panel that I moderated, you know, who actually takes on the risk. And it seemed like in the South African context that, you know, the speaker at least was comfortable with, you know, how risks, who was assuming risks, and then there wasn't an excessive risk imposed on South African players. But I think maybe in the Namibian context, it is a little bit different. It's a much smaller country, and hydrogen is a much bigger deal in relation to the existing economy and the size of the population. And so it becomes a very big issue. Who assumes the risks for this? Because what if, you know, the demand for hydrogen, or, you know, the competitiveness of a certain hydrogen production site, such as Namibia, doesn't play out the way things are expected, and, you know, the investment risk turns into, you know, a stranded asset, and those players, maybe the Namibian government that assumed a lot of risk, are then left with a lot of debt. Okay, so the risk of debt, the risk of you know, things not going well, who assumes those risks, is another very important issue that maybe can be added to that, to the issue of costs and benefits. You know, we also have the risk. And then finally, and then I'll turn it over to you, Alexandra, for kind of finishing up. I think what was great about this conference is that actually talked in a lot of detail, a lot more detail than I've seen in many other fora, about some of these issues. And we managed to bring together some of the players from Chile, from Namibia, from Germany, to talk about these things. And I think that's really the key. I mean, I think it is important, and that's why this conference is important, yeah, it's important to really bring those things into the discussion and have more transparency, and also have the learning occur, so that actors can actually try to develop approaches, try to develop ways of managing these issues, the costs, the benefits, and the risks. And for example, I learned today that you know, the RED already includes a requirement to the Renewable Energy Directive in the European Union, already includes requirements to address sustainability aspects tailored to the biofuels context. But nonetheless, it's there, and it can be further developed and adapted to the hydrogen sector. And I think it's a huge opportunity that needs to be addressed. And it's important, again, to then involve, for example, the Namibian stakeholders, the Chilean stakeholders, in how we flesh out those criteria and these schemes. So with that, yeah, thanks also to the organizing committee, to Benno, to Franziska, to Alexandra, to Alex, for putting this together with myself. And yeah, over to you, Alexandra.
Yeah, thank you, Rainer. So we are both like drawing some conclusions, and of course, probably my focus is a bit more on the risks and the costs, and it's great also to have like this diversity. And we post this provocative title of Fueling a Just Decarbonization or Greening Extractivism. And I guess it is not a no or yes answer, and we have seen that. And I think it's also not really our role to give an answer to that question, but to explore the different factors that need to be taken into account. And in the justice issue, sometimes or very often you speak about a new technology, or about sustainability, or about development, without really opening up on what are like your underlying assumptions. What is like your concept of justice? Like what do you point at? So are we more moving inside like maybe geopolitical interests and saying, okay, how can we secure our energy access and others can benefit from that? Or is it about how can maybe people in the global south lead a better life? And that depends on that. It depends a lot, like how you evaluate and how you approach a certain technology or certain opportunities. And I think what was a nice thing that we have achieved yesterday and today is to bring together people to exchange their experience from different points of views. And there were many aspects that I also had the plan to summarize a little bit the day of yesterday, but maybe I just invite you also to maybe look up. We will upload the videos of the conference to YouTube, to our RIFS YouTube channel. On our conference website, we will include the link there. And yeah, with this, I would also say it was a great discussion. There are many open questions still, so let's go on with the discussion. I hope you could make some new contacts or find new interesting experts that have been talking here to exchange and to dive deeper and yeah, to build up the regulations that are so necessary for building up green hydrogen as one. In the end, also a very tiny component of a lot larger transformation that we need to really achieve a decarbonization and yeah, sustainable future for all of us. So also from my side, thank you very much to the organizing committee and to the audience and to all the speakers. And goodbye.